Gardens are often used as places of contemplation. They can provide us an escape from the hectic world around us. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Join me as we explore the more tranquil side of gardening. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. You know, we live in such a fast-paced and hurried society. Sometimes it's nice to sort of slow down and get away for a while, change the pace just a bit. You know, one of the best ways to do that is through gardening. It's a wonderful pastime that can serve as an escape. Today, I want to take you to Lake Austin Spa Resort in Austin, Texas, where gardening and relaxation go hand in hand. At this place, herbs aren't just used in your meals. They're also used as therapeutic tools. While we're on the subject of herbs, I want to show you a way to mix herbs and flowers to create a beautiful, everlasting impression in your garden, as well as share a delicious recipe using one of those herbs. It's a mint sorbet. And if you're looking for the perfect place for contemplation, the Bishop's Garden is where you'll want to be. We'll travel to the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., where peace and serenity are a top priority. From there, I'll give you some tips on growing herbs that will help you create your own place of tranquility. And I'll show you how to keep mint from spreading like a weed. Now, from my garden, I want to share with you some of what I call good value plants, like Dianthus. And if you're into sweet-smelling flowers, you've got to try some of these Oriental lilies. This is one of my favorites. It's called Stargazer. Now, let's make our way to a place where people are taking full advantage of the healing powers of plants. Lake Austin Spa Resort is next. Welcome back. Today we're exploring the senses and how the garden can enliven all of them. You know, to me, the garden is a place of healing. It's a place I can go to restore myself and reduce stress. And I was delighted to learn that the folks at the Lake Austin Spa Resort feel the same way. They've placed the garden at the forefront of their spa treatments. Looking around the gorgeous lakeside garden, you'll find an abundance of herbs, such as rosemary, which is used in treatments like the sea salt rubs. And they're all natural facials or even garden related, in that they're made up of seaweed. Tricia Shurry is the director of Flora and Fauna for Lake Austin and tells us more.
Lake Austin Spa Resort is focused on mind, body, and spirit, and the garden is a big part of that to renew and recharge people's spirit. And we have a beautiful setting here on the shores of Lake Austin, and we like to take advantage of that tranquil setting. One of the most important things about the job here is that we do garden organically, and I enjoy the fact that we're taking care of the earth, and we have healthy plants that people can feel like they can go out and take a leaf or take a bite from a vegetable that's grown in the garden, and it's not going to be harmful for them. In the garden, our first 4 beds are dedicated to the kitchen, and then we have herb specialty beds incorporated into the middle of the garden. One of the beds is dedicated to the traditional culinary herbs, so we have things like bay laurel and a variety of oreganos, basils, and thymes, all things used for traditional cooking. And then we have a medicinal herb garden. Then we also have a herb garden that is full of what I call the decorative and useful herbs. Then we have a mint bed where we have 3 different kinds of mint, and we have bird and butterfly gardens. Our owners are from Louisiana, and they have fond memories of the sugar kettles, so we incorporated those into our garden. The sugar kettle was once used to boil sugar cane into cane syrup. The garden is important on many levels for the resort. We grow a lot of things that we use in classes, like potpourri classes and pressed flower creations. And we also use the herbs in some of our spa treatments, so you can get a salt rubbed down with some fresh rosemary, or use rose petals in a scrub. And many of the spa treatments use the fresh herbs too.
Not only are herbs used as therapeutic stress relievers, but throughout the millennia, they've been associated with religion and the spirit. A popular place for people seeking that spiritual serenity is the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. When visitors get there, they often discover a pleasant surprise. Most everyone knows we have a national cathedral here in Washington, but not many realize that it has a very large and beautiful garden associated with it, filled with lots of flowers, trees, sculpture, and even herbs, all within 57 acres of grounds. Let's take a look at this fascinating garden and pick up a few useful tips on herbs, tips you can use at home. How much of cultivated space are you responsible for in terms of like herb gardens and flower gardens, roses and so forth?
It's about 35 acres of cultivated, landscaped grounds. In the Bishop's Garden, it really is the horticultural jewel of the cathedral. And we have two perennial borders. One is 75 feet long, one is 50 feet long. The smaller one is all blue flowers. The larger one is a combination. We have tulips in the spring, then it goes into the spring flowering perennials, into the asters, and then into the fall bloomings. And we'll have bloom in the garden basically from February through December. The garden was actually started in the mid-20s, and this whole area was fill from the cathedral. So this south-facing slope was just soil they brought out from the cathedral and put here.
Yeah. So all of the trees in this area would have been planted after that, after the 20s?
Exactly.
You can thank All Hallows Guild for much of the beauty in the cathedral garden. It was an organization established in 1916 for the care and beautification of the cathedral close. You know, everyone knows that herbs are used for cooking and for medicinal use, but they also were supposed to have spiritual properties as well. Can you speak to that?
Well, rue actually supposedly has the power to drive evil spirits away from people's houses, and we have people who take it from the garden rather frequently. We'll end up replanting it about 4 times a year.
They just lift it out of the garden?
Just lift it out. Supposedly, if you take it from someone's garden, it even has more power to drive the evil spirits away, and if it's taken from the cathedral gardens, I suppose it has a whole lot of.
So Joe, you've been gardening here at the cathedral for 6 years and working with these herbs on a daily basis. If someone was going to put in an herb garden, let's say this is a beginner gardener, what sorts of things would you recommend to them?
To start an herb garden, you would need almost full sun, which is 6 to 8 hours a day.
Right.
You'd need good drainage, and you'd need to prepare the soil.
What about fertilization?
For the most part, herbs, they require some fertilization, but a lot of fertilization will cause them to put a lot of soft growth out that's not good, might detract from the flavor of the herb.
The gardens surrounding this cathedral are a part of our rich gardening heritage. It goes way back into history. Many of the herbs grown here have been used for centuries for things as commonplace as pest control to the supernatural. And a lot of these herbs still have modern practical applications today. With the increased popularity of using herbs, Americans are discovering new and exciting ways of growing them. We'll look at some of the ways herbs can really complement your flower garden. That's coming up next, so don't go away. Welcome back. Rather than planting herbs in some isolated place in the garden, some gardeners are really getting creative and growing them among their flowers. They're great to use with annuals and perennials because herbs offer an interesting texture to the flower garden, as well as beautiful blooms. For example, look at the beautiful blue flowers of borage and these round lavender blooms of chives. And take a look at the tiny flowers on this creeping thyme. For years, we've viewed herbs as strictly plants of utility, for seasoning foods and for medicine. But with color like this, they're natural for the flower garden. Herbs can also be used for structure. As you can see in this garden in the heart of Washington, D.C., Dumbarton Oaks, they've used a Germander hedge to border this herb and flower garden. In addition to framing, the small leaves offer nice textural contrast to the other plants in this bed. Other classic herbs for providing texture include the fuzzy lamb's ear, curly leaf parsley, and the broad leaves of sorrel. Now don't stop with just mixing your herbs with perennials and annuals. Experiment and use them with shrubs. Another classic combination is using herbs with roses. Most of us don't have this much space, so it just makes sense to be efficient and combine herbs with flowers, even if all you do is garden in containers. It's the best way I know to have both beauty and taste. Coming up, we'll take a look at what's new in my garden, so don't go away. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome back. As you can see, I've just taken these 3 small rosemary plants and combined them into one larger container for a thicker, fuller presentation. I'm going to place this out on my patio. Now to make it even fuller, I'm just going to take the tips, the plants off like so, and everywhere I cut, new branching will occur. You know, in today's show, we've been looking at the garden as a place of contemplation. We visited the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., where we toured the beautiful Bishop's Garden. We've seen how Lake Austin Spa Resort uses the garden as a way to encourage healthy living and a more relaxing lifestyle. Plus, we've gotten creative in the garden by using herbs with flowers. Now I want to share with you one of my favorite spring blooming flowers. That's not the lilies, we'll get to those in just a minute, but it's equally fragrant. It's a flower called Dianthus or Pinks. But don't let that name fool you. You see, there's a range of color choices when it comes to this little flower. Dianthus is one of those good value plants because they give so much for so little effort on your part. Now, I planted this drift back in the fall and mulched them in. And the first warm days of spring, they began to show a few blooms, and now they're in full flower. I've used them in solid plantings like these pink ones, as well as white. And I've also planted them with other perennials, such as catnip and showy primrose. There are many types of Dianthus available. 2 varieties that I particularly enjoy are Magic Charms and Super Parfait. And believe it or not, the carnations that you buy at the florist are actually large hybrid forms of Dianthus. But it's this old-fashioned pink that I always go for. There's nothing quite like its sweet fragrance. It's just amazing to me that such a tiny flower can pack so much punch. I like the fringe edge of the flowers, and if you're looking for gray-blue foliage, well, it's hard to beat. I think this plant looks great planted along retaining walls, and I'm using them in containers around my pool, along with some other flowers. I suppose the main thing to remember when growing Dianthus is that it needs soil that's well drained. This plant doesn't like wet feet. And depending on the variety, once the flowers have faded, I just cut off the spindly stalks, fertilize them, and they're off and running again. Now, since Dianthus is such a tried and true plant, flower breeders have been working on new and exciting varieties. I was recently introduced to a series of Dianthus from the flower fields called the Star Series. The foliage is beautiful and the colors are crisp, like Arctic white and spangled star. One of the most enjoyable aspects of gardening for me is being able to include lots of fragrant plants. To me, it's a form of aromatherapy. You know, I always try to plant lots of lilies in my garden so I have plenty to cut and bring inside. They're so gorgeous. Don't let that beautiful face fool you. They're actually easy to grow. Lilies are true bulbs, and success in growing them depends on the variety you choose, the condition of the bulbs you select, and how you plant them. This is a large family of plants, and some are easier to grow than others. If you're just getting started, you might try some of the Asiatic lilies. While they're not as fragrant as some, they're very durable. I've grown a variety in my garden for years called Sterling Star. The Oriental hybrids can be a little fussier to grow, but the fragrance makes the effort worthwhile. Now, I've only scratched the surface of lilies. There are lots of varieties out there to choose from. But whatever you choose, you always want to make sure that the bulbs are firm and that they have plenty of fresh, fleshy white roots. A bulb that's soft and shriveled with withered roots should be avoided. As a rule, lilies need excellent drainage, so when I plant, I always incorporate some sand or even small gravel in the bottom of the hole. I also work in some compost and bone meal, and then spread the roots out gently before covering them up. If you're into instant gratification and don't mind spending a little more money, you can often find them grown in containers like this. But for me, the thing I like the most about lilies is that they're a long-lasting perennial that I can always depend on to come back in my garden. Carrying on with this idea of fragrant garden plants, there's nothing more refreshing than mint. I'll share with you a cool recipe for mint sorbet and give you some tips on preventing your mint from becoming a garden thug. So stay with us. Welcome back. Since we've been talking about herbs today, I want to share with you one of my favorite herb recipes. It's mint sorbet. Mint is one of the easiest herbs to grow. In fact, it can grow so rampantly, it can become a weed. But I like to keep it around anyway because of its fresh scent, and I like to use it in certain dishes. You shouldn't let the fact that it is such a vigorous grower scare you away because there's a way to keep it contained. Rather than planting the mint directly into your beds, cut the bottom out of a large plastic nursery container and bury it in the soil. Then plant the mint within the container. This will keep it from spreading and taking over, at least for a while. And we're used to using it in iced tea and as garnishes. Since this stuff is so readily available, there has to be other ways to use it. I recently ran across a recipe for a delicious dessert, mint sorbet. There are so many mints you can use for this, but the one I prefer is one I grow in my own garden. It's the mild-flavored spearmint. Sorbets of any kind are a light, low-cal, no-fat treat. This one is really simple to put together. It only takes a few ingredients. First, I stripped and washed enough leaves to make 1 packed cup of spearmint. Then I prepared a solution of 3 cups water, 2/3 cup of corn syrup, and the same amount of sugar. I brought the mixture to a boil, then added the mint. I covered the pot and removed it from the burner and let it set for about 15 minutes. After the mint has flavored the solution, I strain it and add the juice of 2 fresh squeezed lemons. Then I chill or partially freeze the liquid, remove, and fold in 2 beaten egg whites. You just freeze this like ice cream, and this sorbet is delicious. Ask anyone who grows herbs and they'll tell you that mint is one of the easiest to grow. You can grow it in containers or even in the shade. Well, that's it for today's show. We've seen how herbs are such a great way to spice up the garden with their beauty and aroma. Hope you enjoyed that peaceful walk through the Bishop's garden. And the next time you need a little R&R, hope you'll check out a place like the Lake Austin Spa Resort. Now, for any information on any of the topics you've seen in today's show, including that delicious mint sorbet recipe, you can check out my website. That address is pallensmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.